You can't speak about the Bears franchise without mentioning the great linebacker Dick Butkus, who passed away yesterday. And the timing of it, while you don't want to see anybody pass away, but the timing of him getting the national exposure, kind of reintroducing him to another generation. I love that fact that people will be asking questions, maybe Googling Dick Butkus, looking at highlights, what he meant to the game. The fact that he was, an Illinois guy, went to the University of Illinois, played offense and defense when he first got there, center and then linebacker. And then he became pretty much the poster child for being a linebacker in the NFL, at least the old NFL. He was Chicago Bears football. He, along with Papa Bear Hallis and Gale Sayers. They didn't play in playoff games. Dick Butkus did not play in a playoff game. But one of the greatest linebackers of all time, passing away at the age of 80. And there are admired athletes in Chicago, beloved athletes, but he was different. He was a hometown guy, played for the Bears, went to Illinois, and, was still attached to the Chicago Bears. When you saw Dick Butkus on the football field, you saw tough. That was the word that always came to mind. Intimidation. Like we have guys you go, oh man, he scares me. There were players playing against Dick Butkus who didn't want to go back into the game. They were that intimidated, afraid of Dick Butkus. Now, what you could get away with back then on the defensive side of the ball is a lot different than you have now, but the intimidation factor was certainly there. NFL Films helped elevate the greatness of Dick Butkus because it wasn't a good team, but he was a great player on a good team, an average team. Gale Sayers was a Hall of Famer on an average team. And you had George Halas, one of the great coaches of all time. But Paulie's dad grew up with Dick Butkus. Paulie sent a picture last night that I thought was very cool. It was at Dick Butkus's wedding, and Paulie's dad is there in the front row. So pretty cool picture you sent last night.
Thank you. They played a little high school football at a place called Chicago Vocational, and it's on the south side of the area called Hegewisch. And my dad and he became friends, stayed friends afterwards. He actually lived in our little town of Glenwood. But I was too young to understand it. I was, I think, 2 when Dick Butkus retired. But I do remember seeing the reaction of people in the neighborhood occasionally, and it was like this godlike figure walked in. But, I wonder, I was going to ask you, was he one of those football players that was more famous than the team he was on? Because if you lived in Cincinnati, you knew who Dick Butkus was. When I was a kid, I knew who Jack Lambert was. And guys like that, because they were just...
But Jack Lambert was on a great team, one of the greatest defenses of all time. The only time I was exposed to Dick Butkus is when the Browns growing up played the Bears, and then you always worried about Dick Butkus hurting Jim Brown or whoever your running back was or your quarterback, Frank Ryan, and that Gale Sayers was going to run, for 5 touchdowns. But you knew you were going to beat the Bears because the Bears weren't good, but you were aware of Dick Butkus. He was out there. He was number 51. That's one of those jersey numbers, like defensive players. You have Michael Jordan's 23 now. Butkus was a number where you really had to have a coach who thought you were really good to give you 51. It's not like you go, I'd like to have 51. Not so fast here. We're going to give it to this guy over here. But Dick Butkus passing away at the age of 80. And he was also in movies. He was also in commercials. Great sense of humor. And when you met him, I should say, he could disarm you, because you weren't quite sure. Like he looked like a bear. It's one of those where that was the nickname of the Bears, but, he had the mustache. He was a big guy, big shoulders, but he wasn't intimidating when he talked to you. And I remember a couple of times that I was in the room with him, and he was funny, and he loved telling stories. And he just, he had a knack about him, a character about him. He had that it factor with him. So Dick Butkus passing away last night and getting kind of a national coming out party. Like Franco Harris, they were going to have a tribute to Franco Harris, I think retire his jersey, and then he passed away. And, you open up the scrapbook sometimes, and that's part of my job sometimes, is to recall what I remember when I got to see most of these players. I got to see him play. I didn't get to see him in person, but I got to see him play. So you have those certain players, and being able to recall some of those memories, it's beneficial for me because I can harken back to, my childhood or when I was a teenager watching some of these players play.